Hello, this is another episode of Slots and Locks. I'm Mello.
And I'm Tim. All right, let's get this one started. Interesting enough, this episode is a little bit different. There was a post that we'll probably post on the screen right now that was made on LinkedIn, and it was a question or a comment that Hard Rock just launched or just reached 4,000 games in New Jersey, and so this episode is really around what we call the 4,000 game problem.
And that's Hard Rock Digital, to be clear, right?
Correct.
4,000 games
Yes.
sounds incredibly impressive unless you're scrolling through them.
100%. Yeah, that in of itself is a part-time job.
Yeah, so I guess the question we're going to ponder, if you will, is what is the magic number of games? And this is something that Tim and I probably spent a good portion of our time at IGT trying to figure out and trying to convince other people.
Yeah, and shout out to Sean Ryan for kind of prompting this, I guess, episode as well with that question. So, I think the it's 4,000 is it's a strategic scale or is a cosmetic scale. Catalog size in and of itself becomes cosmetic when it signals depth, but it does improve discoverability, revenue concentration, profitability, and we're going to get on everything what all this stuff means in a moment. But in a high level, basically what I'm saying is that you run into 4,000 might sound good, but if players only play 10 games, is it really that great?
Yeah, not only that, if you need 4,000 games to succeed, just I mean from a logistics perspective, from syncing the games to your back end to dealing contractually with all those people, I mean you really have to ask yourself the question, is the total number of games really your only problem?
Exactly. All right, so we're going to talk about something that Mel and I have talked about for many years, and it's probably a perfect moment to kind of introduce this new framework, this concept that we've been talking about.
Oh, good. We're naming things now. I like this.
Exactly. It's called a perception probability gap, and
Do we have a trademark on that?
we probably should. And I know it sounds like very academic and stuff like that, but let's kind of jump into kind of what it is. So there's a perception layer, which is really about what the player believes is happening. But we're gonna flip this a little bit because we're talking about game content as well, and so it could be what an operator perceives is happening. So perception layer of a player believes is happening something like, oh, the slot's due, or red's going to hit, or something like that. That's the perception. The probability layer, which is what the math actually says. So, for example, we talked about roulette previously. The odds of red hitting on the next spin is exactly the same odds as the previous spin, right? And the last piece of this framework is really around the design layer. So how the product intentionally shapes that perception. So it's maybe the slot game is built in such a way that it feels like the next spin is going to be due. So it's that layer itself or the design layer itself that shapes that perception. So that's what we're going to layer into this conversation today and talk through specifically when it comes down to the 4,000 games, and we'll talk about a few other things as well.
Yeah, and and just a side note, we've talked about the perception layer, like Tim said, in our gaming myths, what the player believes. Like he said, game is due, et cetera, et cetera. We've also talked about the probability layer, I think, in our first episode with regard to volatility and RTP. And the design layer, I think, is fairly the newest part of this. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, but we probably touched upon this in terms of the game, the feel, the journey, what the player sees and feels and the design of that. We probably haven't called any of these things out specifically, but I think it's good to kind of give it some names and give it the concept and the framework, layer this into the framework itself.
No, I like what we're building here. It's really fresh, and I think it's the gap between those layers is sort of where the engagement lives, and the engagement is essentially what you want as a operator or even a game designer, a game developer. More importantly, not a design. Well, I guess game design, game development. Now I'm just lingering, but yeah, that's where the engagement lives. And essentially you want that to increase your lifetime value and ultimately figure out what that optimal number of games is.
Yeah, and so let's kind of jump into it. And by the way, we probably should always say this, but I'd love to hear your comments. If you think we're crazy, drop a comment, drop a like, follow our channel as well. But let's talk about the perception layer first and kind of drill in a little bit into this. So we'll run the 4,000 games through that lens, and jump right into it. So the 4,000 games appears like choice, uh, depth, strength. When you look at it, it seems like a huge number and huge milestone. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
I mean, conceptually, it sort of feels like I'm walking into the Mr. Beast version of a Vegas property online, given his large scale of events. It just
Exactly.
seems daunting.
It's almost overwhelming. So there's so many choices, and there's always something for everyone. So players, and this is the perception side. So players think, I'll find something perfect.
And then operators think more supply equals more revenue.
And then competitors, when they see that, they, well, I need 4,200 games.
Everyone loves the number. If 5 is 5x, then 10 is 10x. Higher ups love the bigger number. Gambling analysts,
Okay.
wow, I'm editing me now. I made fun of you, but yeah, I'm editing me. Higher ups love the bigger number. Gambling analysts, probably not so much.
Exactly. So that's kind of perception layer, right? So there's three different perceptions between players, operators, competitors. Now let's talk about the probability layer itself. So the probability layer says something different. Revenue is concentrated.
Yeah, and historically speaking, from our history, the top 5 to 10% of games drive most of your GGR. I mean, for us, if I remember right, it was almost a perfect Pareto optimality. It was like 20% drove 80% of the revenue. It was just almost beautifully perfect with
Hey, you
regard to
drop
that.
these words like Pareto. I feel like you're gonna have to describe what those things are for a layman's term for people like myself.
I'm speaking to the math people out there. They know. They know what Pareto optimality is. And you all have AI. Just chat it up.
Fair enough. All right. So which basically means if we talk about the top 5, 10%, which means out of 4,000 games,
I guess if we do the 5 to 10, a few hundred are doing most of the work. I would even beg to differ. It's probably 50, but yeah.
so in a sense, like abundance is perceived, but concentration is real.
And that, in a nutshell, is the first perception probability gap.
Yeah, you're
Trademark. Slots and locks.
and you're increasing visual density faster than revenue density. And I think that's the big thing. Now, go ahead. We're going to add something.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm just going to go talk about the design layer because that determines whether 4,000 feels empowering or overwhelming.
Yeah, and so this gets into search, filters, recommendation, carousels, personalization, all of that. When we're
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, if you have 4,000 games, even if you have 40, you know, you know, headers, that's still 100 games. That's right. That's right. It's 40 times 100. Yeah. Okay. My math's right. It's still 100 games in 40 different tables. I just think of an Excel spreadsheet. It would just be like daunting. So in effect, your 4,000 games effectively becomes 40.
yeah, so if your discovery is weak, that's exactly how it feels. If discovery is strong, and again, I define discovery, but everything I said before around search, filters, recommendations, personalization. Imagine you just had 4,000 games on the screen. No one's going to keep scrolling endlessly through 4,000 games. So if the discovery is
Right.
strong,
Right.
the depth itself can support retention.
Well, yeah, and I think scale without UX is just clutter with better marketing. And
Exactly.
and and keep in mind, most of these players, let's say they have two or three favorite games, those URLs are saved. So you have a bunch of dead links almost to the point.
Yeah. So
Maybe not dead links,
in a way,
questionable offerings.
exactly. But in a way, I think what we're getting at here is that maybe there's not a right number because there's so many other factors that play here. And I think why don't we just drill into that a little bit and let's talk about like retention curves and every mechanic, itself kind of burns out over time.
Yeah, and be clear. I'm not saying 4,000 is the wrong number. I'm just saying let's think about 4,000 from a conceptual point of view and think about the player journey to try to find these games. So, because did you say player retention curve? Is that another trademarked term?
I think so. We're introducing lots of trademarks into this conversation as well and frameworks, but I think it's
Man,
important. I think we talked about educating people and talking about the insider view. So hopefully this is teaching someone something.
it's burning a hole in our savings accounts. Anyway, but yeah, but players ultimately fall in love with the volatility profile of a game.
Exactly. They binge it.
Then variance hits, fatigue hits, and then they cool off.
And they don't leave because they hate slots per se.
Yeah, they leave essentially because they're either bored with the mechanic, they figured it out, they want to move on, or or they ran out of money. I mean, kind of why they leave, right?
Yeah, and then a lot of times they probably have a budget, but I mean, I think that's where the catalog depth can support lifetime value. And I might use, or we might use this term called LTV, but that's lifetime value. Lifetime value is how we analyze the value of a player, typically over 36 months, but it can be less, more or less. But it's the kind of value curve over a period of time of the player, what we predict the value would be of that player.
Or the game, right? I mean, and I think if you are looking at lifetime value of a game or lifetime value of a player, you have to have adjacent substitutes to extend that personal player's journey. Because keep in mind, there's many sites with similar and same games with the same exact kind of player game mechanic.
Yeah, and this gets into, and I think we've touched on it in other previous episodes, but the launch cadence really matters as well.
Yeah, because typically new releases will always reset those burnout cycles, and each game, specific game mechanic, sort of has a different kind of burnout cycle.
Yeah, and it's not a vanity metric or anything like that. It's really that's a lifetime value strategy as a whole. The other piece of this as well, as it relates to games and content and knowing the right content, is really about segments of cohorts of players. So not all the players want the same thing. And so we were
The,
talking about, Hard Rock New Jersey and stuff like that. Um, if there's 5 players and they all like the same thing, then you probably don't need 4,000 games. But if you have lots of players and huge amount of cohorts that want different things,
yeah, that would be like the dream scenario. Do you remember the company Blue Square many years ago?
oh
So
yeah,
that was they were high volatility chasers and table game players. You probably could have fitted them with like 20 games, like if you included blackjack and table games. But yeah, so you have the high volatility chasers,
yeah, you could have low volatility grinders,
bonus hunters.
brand loyalists, you name it. There's a lots of different types of cohorts and players out there.
And so if you understand cohorts, those 4,000 games is chaos. I mean, from an analytic point of view, if you wanted to bucket those games into some form of cohort, which then you could do cluster analysis, blah, 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 blah. Also, Google that or whatever. You're looking at analytical chaos, really.
Yeah, and if you do understand the cohorts and the segments and what players are actually coming to your site, 4,000 could be segmented supply based off what we said. Like maybe people love Egyptian style games, or they like games that are dribblers and high volatile games. Like, and that's where you really segment players, and 4,000 could be the right number of games based off your segments.
So yeah, so I guess the hot take is the question isn't really how many games you have.
It's really how many cohorts, how many games per cohort.
100%.
Yeah. Another factor I think that's not really talked about as well, that I really think we need to talk about, which is the economics, specifically what you're paying for the games and the RTP itself, the return to player. Those are two important factors that I think gets overlooked when you start talking about, the right number of games. So let's get a little bit uncomfortable here because not all games cost the same, as you and I both will know well.
And this is all vetted out during the contractual negotiation between supplier and website, or is it supplier and operator? There you go. That's better.
Yeah.
Or licensee and licensor if you're going to be real technical. But revenue shares vary. Minimum guarantees on IP products will vary. There are hybrid deals. There can be stepped deals where the rev shares are different from, the first million you get 13%, the second million you get 12, whatever. So that all changes.
We probably should say that for people that don't know, depending on who's watching this, but the people that don't know, rev shares are basically the game supplier itself that's building a game, like the IGTs of the world, will charge a percentage of total amount that was won or lost for the month. And so they might charge like 10% to 15% to 5%. It varies. So just so people understand that. But the other component of this, which is the return to player, RTB can vary as well.
Yeah, and a higher RTP reduces hold percentage. Wait, hold on.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, so I'll say it more confidently. A higher RTP reduces hold percentage.
Yeah, which basically impacts profitability, which can be great for retention, but hurts that margin overall.
Yeah, and if your highest performing games are high RTP and high rev share,
Yeah, you can grow revenue and shrink profitability at the same time.
okay, so your volatility in revenue is chaotic from a month to month perspective. And that's not a fun board slide for executives and management to go through.
Exactly. So blended margin matters more than total category size or catalog size itself.
That's
All right.
that's fun to say.
Yeah, exactly. So there's another factor as part of this economics as well around content, which is around first party content. So you can license if you're a little bit smaller, you license a lot of content you get from the big boys like Light and Wonder and IGs of the world and every and we go on and on evolution and stuff like that. But there's other concepts as you get larger, and most of these big companies do this. DraftKings, the FanDuel's world. In this case, I know Hard Rock does as well. But now here's where Hard Rock gets interesting. If it looks at like they're launching their own content for the most part.
Yeah, so and that ultimately changes the economics because then they become no longer just a price taker, they're also a price maker.
Yeah, so first party games reduce supplier cost. Now it might increase
And
development cost, but it does hit supplier cost.
so yeah, so for a company like DraftKings, and I do remember DraftKings once they put a lot of pressure on us with regard to blackjack, and they claimed they were going to make their own. I think they ultimately did, but because they wanted just one other supplier, they could actually dictate the price on what the blackjack would be. So it gives them a lot of margin control
Yeah, and it gives you more merchandising freedom as well.
from operator perspective, right?
Operator, yes, from the DraftKings perspective.
Yeah, so now your featured games aren't automatically your most expensive ones. They're whatever you kind of put in their place. Now, if you go back to the DraftKings example with blackjack, our blackjack outperformed their blackjack all the time, even though the placement wasn't as significant. So, style and quality also matter as well.
Certainly, but my guess would be that their blackjack game was significantly more profitable for them, even at a less
Unless it cost them millions of dollars to build. Yeah, you're right.
exactly. So this goes into like vertical integration itself shifts that leverage by building their own content.
So while I was, speaking, questioning the 4,000 games, now it might include strategically higher margin titles and a better cohort balance. So I've jumped on. Now I'm the opposite. I'm arguing the other side within like 10 minutes.
Well, it's sort of, but I think that I think we're coming to the answer of it depends. Which
Tim, I'm open minded to these things, so I'm cool.
yeah. So if you're running as an operator, this is not a counting exercise itself. You're not counting the number of games you have.
So yeah, so it's ultimately what I was an expert in. It's portfolio optimization.
Exactly. So yes, you optimize for revenue concentration, margin mix, the RTP balance, the corridor alignment, retention curves and burnout cycles, launch cadence, supplier leverage. All of those things go into it.
And so scale without margin awareness ultimately just becomes cosmetic.
And scale retention logic and economics alignment is really truly scale.
And I think unless you're, carrying 4 million monthly uniques, I don't think the magic number is wait, I'm a mess. So unless you have like 4 million, monthly uniques, the magic number isn't 4,000.
It's a number that maximizes lifetime value and blended profitability. And
Nuanced.
exactly. And so the short answer is depends and depends on the size of your company and the number of players you have, your discoverability, the profitability behind these, all those things have to play a big role. All right. So hopefully we answered that question. Love to hear your feedback. Tell us where we're way off base and 5,000 is the right number. But tell us what you think. Drop a comment. Now, I think I just want to say a few maybe hot takes here and talk about a few things as it relates to this. So I think most operators add games faster than they remove underperformers.
Yeah, I mean, all the time. There were so many ghost games back in the old days. I think catalog size, it's always the whole thing is like if 10 is good, 11 is better. So catalog size is often competitive signaling.
Yeah, a well curated 1,000 game library with strong economics can outperform a 4,000 poorly optimized titles. That's not to say
Yeah.
that New Jersey is poorly optimized. It's just to say that if you do all these other things well, 1,000 game library can be much better and stronger.
I mean, if they have 4 million monthly uniques in New Jersey, yeah, God bless them.
Exactly.
But I think another key is your players won't need a map or a compass to find games. Originally, obviously, they can save the URLs at some point, but I think you can't really stress the effect of the player retention curve. Trademark slots and locks.
Exactly. So I guess we kind of alluded to this whole time, but what is the magic number?
The magic number is technically dynamic. I mean, it depends on your cohorts. How many different types of players do you have? Your contracts. I mean, who, if you have minimum guarantees you need to meet, it makes some sense there. The UX, your UX, and your ultimate lifetime value strategy, which is essentially, your player. There's a word here. I need to find it.
You're just having one of those.
It depends on your cohorts, the number of sub markets you're kind of dealing with from a player perspective, your contracts, your minimum guarantees you're meeting, your rev share splits and stuff like that. Your UX, I mean, how messy do you want that front page to be and the top of the fold, et cetera, et cetera. And your lifetime strategy, which is basically your player philosophy.
Yeah, and if you don't know your revenue concentration and blended margin,
The number doesn't matter. It's pointless.
exactly. So I don't know if you give an answer, but I think hopefully we get context to answering the question of there's so many other factors that go into whether that's the right number or not.
Oh, Tim, we can provide you that answer.
What is the right number? Is it? Didn't you say to me earlier this week it was
It's 42. The
there you go.
the correct number is 42.
It's always 42, right?
It's always 42. It's the meaning of life.
Exactly.
I mean, you just ask Alexa. She'll tell you.
Yep. I have done that before. But they flip between other answers as well. But I have gotten an answer. Anyhow, hopefully enjoyed this and it was informative, knowledgeable. But please give us a like, give us a comment, and shout out if you want us to talk about more subjects like this. I think we're going to introduce something like this as we see on LinkedIn and see posts like that. I think it's always good, top of mind, to talk about those things and talk about the things
Yep.
that affect our industry.
Yeah, we're being cutting edge, Tim. And keep in mind, we always have to have the disclaimer, always gamble responsibly and don't spend more than you can.
There you go. So that's our episode this week. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.